So I literally just got done watching the 7th episode of House of the Dragon's 2nd season, titled The Red Sowing, and well, first of all, that name goes incredibly hard, but more importantly, I thought this was an excellent episode of television. I put out a video a few days ago where I spoke about some of my flaws with this show, especially in regards to its 2nd season. I won't go too in-depth here, but to sum it up very briefly, while I am still really enjoying House of the Dragon and think it's doing a lot of stuff right, I have found its reliance on plot over character to drive the narrative forward to be a little disappointing, especially considering how the first season ended with that chilling stare into the camera that Rhaenyra does, which I interpreted as the show telling the audience that the polite pleasantries and passive aggression of the first season were about to be traded in for emotion, anger, ruthless ambition, fire, and blood, but which in the end just paved the way for a lot of scenes where characters sit around, still being passive, still doing everything they can to avoid conflict. I also don't think this season has been as strong as the first in regards to showing, not telling. Like, I don't really think we've learnt anything new about any of our main characters. Most of the runtime for each episode is very much dedicated instead to what's happening in King's Landing, what's happening on Dragonstone, what's happening in Harrenhal. And I guess I was just wishing for the characters to be a little more proactive, and the storytelling to be a little more nuanced and cohesive. However, I am glad to report that this most recent episode of House of the Dragon really did answer a lot of my prayers. I would probably call it the best episode of the season so far. Let's start with the Harrenhal plot. I mentioned in the last video how, while I'm definitely on board with Daemon having a meandering side quest of tripping bulls in the Riverlands, it was being dragged down slightly by the presence of a similar meandering pace in the central story, turning what should have been a fascinating psychedelic detour into what feels like filler that only stands to detract from the main plot, while removing one of the story's most volatile and proactive characters. However, with that being said, I found all the Harrenhal stuff in this episode to be really compelling, as while I do love the character of Daemon Targaryen and all his arrogant, swashbuckling aura, it was very fun to watch him sort of be put in his place by the kid Oscar Tully. Love this guy, man. Not only was the chemistry between Matt Smith and Archie Barnes excellent here, but the dynamic between these two characters, with Oscar throughout the scene gaining the respect of Daemon, the Riverlords, and the audience through his word choice and politicking and, excuse my French, but huge set of balls. It was just all so well executed. It felt like, dare I say it, classic Game of Thrones. Also, shout out to the costume department for creating all the distinctive armors for each of the Riverlands houses. That's something even Game of Thrones never really bothered with. We also get the return of Aegon Targaryen II, the one true king of Westeros, everyone's favourite character, who is still suffering greatly from his burns, but is at least now awake and able to speak, and I was really glad to see the dynamic between him and Larys Strong continue. They had a great scene in the last episode, obviously both being people who are physically disabled, and I'm happy to see that they'll clearly be a thing moving forward. I'm really interested to see where the relationship goes, considering Aegon feels like one of the more human characters in the show, while Larys, well, he's basically a psychopath. But yeah, it was just interesting. We also get a few scenes with Corlys Velaryon, who, to be honest, is not someone I have ever really connected with in this show, which is weird considering the Sea Snake is one of the coolest characters in the book, but they're just still not really giving him anything to do, especially in this 2nd season, despite him now being Hand of the Queen. And it pains me to say this, but I feel the exact same way about Alicent Hightower, who in my opinion was one of the best characters in the 1st season. I think Olivia Cook is terrific in this role. However, once again, she just doesn't have anything to do anymore. She spends most of the time just standing around, looking really stressed. And I think this episode actually acknowledges this by basically just giving her a spa day, away from all the action and politics of King's Landing. Hopefully in the 3rd season the writers can give both of these characters more of a reason to exist in this story. Anyway, let's now talk about what takes up most of this episode's runtime, which is all the stuff on Dragonstone and the quest to find new dragon riders. Like I said in the previous video, I do think that the Blacks have been pretty boring this season, which is a bit strange considering they are clearly who George R.R. Martin prefers, they are clearly who the showrunners prefer, they are clearly the cooler of the two factions, but they've all been so passive and monotonous and complacent that it's been hard to connect with any of the characters. However, that all changes in this episode. First of all, we are finally given some characterization for Prince Jacaerys Velaryon. At last! The guy finally has something to do other than just standing at the edge of the frame, mewing incessantly. Seriously though, all the memes this season about mewing have been so funny. But yeah, we get this great scene between Jacaerys and Rhaenyra where he talks about their plans to find bastards and baseborn people with the blood of the dragon to become dragon riders. He finally admits to his mother that he knows he is a bastard because, let's face it, it's pretty obvious. And he acknowledges that the only thing setting him apart from other Targaryen bastards is his dragon, and that giving other Targaryen bastards dragons really throws his legitimacy as heir to the Iron Throne into question. It's actually a very good point from the kid, and not something I had even considered. I don't know, maybe I need to mew more. Maybe it gives you special insights. Anyway, most of the second half of this episode is dedicated to the titular Red Sowing, and I'll be honest, I was basically on the edge of my seat for the whole thing. This is easily one of the best scenes from the entirety of House of the Dragon so far. The fact that a television show, may I remind you, looks and feels this cinematic is just incredible to see. I think the decision to have all the potential dragon riders gather in the Dragon Mount at the same time, while not making much sense from an in-universe point of view, was the correct thing to do in terms of sheer spectacle. Also, having the dragon riders refuse to help with the sowing just added even more tension to the whole thing. And yes, of course, you kind of know who's going to claim the dragons even if you haven't read the books. Like, let's be real, they're not going to kill off one of the two characters who have been built up so much over time and give a dragon to some random person we've never met before. But like I said, I still found the scene to be pretty tense and exciting. It also helps that Ulf and Hugh, the two dragon claimants, are as likable as they are. I love the scene earlier on in the episode where word gets out that Rhaenyra is looking for new dragon riders, and one of Ulf's drinking buddies is like, "Ulf, you always brag about being a Targaryen," and Ulf just recreates the Tyson Fury meme.
To be honest with you, I don't feel well. I've got a bit of a cold. I think I've got some tonsillitis going on. My legs feel weak. I feel fucked, to be honest.
It's always nice to see very normal human people be thrown into epic fantasy stories, you know? It's just fun, especially in a show where most of the characters are highborn. I love the way in which both Ulf and Hugh claim their respective dragons and how it links to their personalities, with the badass masculine Hugh saving a woman from being burnt alive before just completely standing his ground, and Vermithor clearly respecting that, while Ulf accidentally stumbles into Silverwing's lair and is lucky enough that the dragon takes a liking to him. And I'm not exactly sure whether Ulf flying into King's Landing was to bait out Aemond and Vhagar, or whether he just decided to go without Rhaenyra's consent, but nevertheless, that final shot of the episode with the 3 dragons went so incredibly hard. It did remind me a bit of the final shot of season 1, but I do get the impression, especially considering I've read Fire and Blood, that stuff really is about to go down this time round. Anyway, overall, I thought this was a great episode of House of the Dragon. It definitely lifted my spirits after what has been a pretty inconsistent season, and got me really excited for the finale next week. Please let me know what you thought of the episode in the comment section. I'm really interested to see what people have to say, and I'll see you in the next one.